Hello everyone and welcome. Today I'm going to be giving you some brief instruction on rhythm and meter in poetry. So rhythm is the set of stressed and unstressed syllables in a poem. Generally, rhythm is actually used in everything that we read and write. Everything that you come across with words that will have some sort of natural rhythm due to which syllables are naturally stressed and unstressed. And that creates the rhythm of the things that we read and say. Now, specifically, when you read a poem, each line will have a specific number of syllables in it, and the different syllables will be either stressed or unstressed. And so that's what you want to be looking to pick out when you are trying to figure out the rhythm of a piece of poetry. So we talked about syllables when we discussed haiku. So remember, the syllable are the single parts of a sound. So when you're speaking, naturally you stress some syllables and leave others unstressed just based on the parts of the word that you emphasize as you're speaking. When you put a lot of words together, you start to see patterns in the rhythm of which syllables are stressed and unstressed as you speak. So rhythm is often a natural thing. It's in everything you say and write, even if you don't intend it to be, or if you don't always notice that it's there. So then when you have an actual poem, there are often established rhythmic patterns within that poem. So that is called meter. Meter is the specific pattern of stressed and unstressed syllables within a specific poem. So much of English poetry is written in lines that string together one or more feet. Feet is an individual rhythmic unit. So feet are the individual building blocks of meter. So here are the most common feet, the rhythms they represent, and an example of that rhythm. So Anapest is da da da. So that's two unstressed, then stressed. So as in, but of course. So you stress the course. But of are both said in an unstressed way, and you stress the third syllable. So you have two syllables unstressed and one stressed with Anapest. So, but of course. So that's Anapest, two unstressed, then stressed. A dactyl is the opposite. You have one stressed, then two unstressed. So da, da, da. As in, honestly. So the on, that first syllable is stressed, then esly are unstressed. Those two syllables are unstressed. So honestly, stressed, two unstressed. Then next is an I am. An I am is when you have an unstressed, then stressed. So da da, as in collapse. So the second syllable is the stressed or emphasized syllable. And then finally, we have a trochee, which is the opposite of an I am. It's stressed, then unstressed. So da da, as in pizza. The first syllable is stressed, the second is unstressed. So when a poet is writing a poem when they're building a line of their poem, poets can string together repetitions of one or more of these feet. So when they do that, when they put together one or more of the feet, they get different meters. Because remember, the meter is the pattern of stressed and unstressed syllables in a verse of poetry. So you have first the type of feet, and then the number of feet to create the meter. So for example, if you have just 1 foot, if you just have one Anapest, that's a monometer. If you have 2 diameter, 3 trimeter, 4 tetrameter, 5 feet pentameter, 6 feet hexameter. So the most famous is iambic pentameter, which is a string of 5 iambs. So that means you have 5 sets of unstressed, then stressed syllables. So you get total 10 syllables. So in a poem that is using iambic pentameter, you end up having each line has 10 syllables in the pattern of unstressed, stressed. That. So, for example, there is the line in Christopher Marlowe's poem, "Was this the face that launched 1,000 ships?" So we have unstressed, was stressed. This is the stress word in those 2 syllables. Was this, unstressed, stressed. The face, the is unstressed and face is stressed. That's where the emphasis is placed. That launched, again, that is unstressed. Launched is stressed. A thou, so is unstressed. Then the first syllable of 1,000 is stressed. Thou, and then send. So 1,000. In 1,000, we have the thou is the emphasized or stressed syllable, and sand is the unstressed. And then we end with one more stressed, ships. So you see that there are 5 unstressed syllables alternating with 5 stressed. In other words, 5 does. As you read more poetry, you'll start to recognize this different feet and meters. You start to pick up, especially, this is why it's especially important to read aloud poetry. It's pretty hard to pick out all of these stressed and unstressed syllables when you're just reading a poem on a page. That's why when you read aloud, it's more easy to get a feel for that natural rhythm that starts to come out within all of the words. So this is the basic simple information of meters. So meter is then overall what is the specific pattern of rhythm that the author has put into place in their poem. And so you decipher the meter by figuring out which syllables are stressed and unstressed in a poem. So to do this, you first start looking for what's the number of syllables. So, because as I mentioned, if it's pentameter with iambic, it always has to be 10. Versus if you just had like a monometer, that would just be a really short line of either 2 or 3 syllables, depending on the feet. And then once you have the number of syllables, you want to look at the specific words and figure out which syllables are being stressed and unstressed in order to figure out the pattern of feet. And then you figure, once you have the type of feet, you then count to figure out the number of feet in the poem. This can be pretty complicated. It can be a little tricky at first when you're trying to figure out which words are stressed and unstressed, but if you work to read the poem aloud, it'll help you to really figure out which words you're naturally stressing and unstressing to help you then figure out what the pattern the author has put in place is. Of course, not every poem has a specific meter to it, such as free verse poems don't have a specific meter to them, but they do still have a natural rhythm. That's where we have the distinction between rhythm and meter. Rhythm is just the sounds of stressed and unstressed within a poem. Meter is when there is a specific pattern to that within the poem. Both of them are used to create a natural flow of a poem, of the way that you read a poem, to add an extra layer of interpretation and an extra type of feeling that goes along with the poem. So now that we understand what meter is, it's the other aspect to know is, why is this important and why do authors use different meters in poetry? So the important aspect of rhythm and meter is that different authors use different rhythms in order to evoke certain feelings from you as the reader. So, for example, iambic pentameter is one of the most popular types of meter because this specific meter is used in order to sort of emulate everyday speech. So that's the idea of when you're reading a poem with iambic pentameter, it's using that to try and emulate the way that we actually speak, but in a more rhythmic and set up pace. Whereas there are other types of meter that are created in order to help you remember what they're saying. That's where the original purpose of rhythm and meter came in, because if you have a specific beat in the words and lines that you're saying, it'll help you remember what those words are. And then even other types of meter are created in order to sound more musical or like a song, and so that creates a specific feeling with those poems. In general, meter is used in order to give poetry a more lyrical feeling, because when you have a pattern of rhythm, it makes it more musical and rhythmic, because it's continuing with the same pattern, so that makes it more of a sing-songy and lyrical feeling, versus no verse free verse poems, which don't have a specific meter. They still have rhythm, but they don't have a pattern meter. So those poems also have the lack of meter for a reason. It creates a more free-flowing and open feeling with the poem because there's no strict pattern in place. Finally, when you look at which words and syllables are stressed and unstressed in a poem, it helps you to figure out what ideas and words are being emphasized in a poem to help you try to figure out what the overall meaning of the poem could be. So overall, you want to be looking to figure out the rhythm or meter of a poem in order to help you interpret the overall meaning, because it helps to point to which ideas are emphasized, as well as sometimes helps to contribute to the overall meaning of the poem, depending upon what the specific pattern or lack thereof that an author chooses to use.